you have to have a North Star. You have to have like strategy. You need to have a clear vision. You then need to have that broken down into clear behaviors of what are those behaviors of success of how we want to bring employees in and work together.
Hey, it's Nikki Lewallen Gregory, and you're on Gut+Science. You're in for a fast-paced, storytelling, action item-rich leadership growth experience. I hope you make this podcast a habit. I consider it a leadership mentoring tool. Learning together makes us better together, and that is how we change the world around us. Let's get to it. Welcome to Gut+Science, Mindy Honcoop. As a Chief People Officer and People Strategy Impact Maker, I want to learn from you about a topic you are both passionate and knowledgeable about: human care design. So I get to be your student today. I might ask a lot of questions, but I'll keep us on track, I promise. Might have to bring you back for another episode, but what is human care design?
Human care design is similar to human-centered design, but it takes it a step further. It really starts to focus in and get really intentional around that word care. I think it's easy to think we know that answer, but care is unique to each person. There's a lot of cultural nuances that go into it. When we holistically think about human-centered design, if we're doing that well, we are creating space to co-create with employees. We are coming from a place of where we are creating solutions, thinking about how to solve problems with that person, with the employees at the center. And there's a level of knowledge that's required to know about that employee, but often we're just getting to the emotional level of how are we delighting them? How are we supporting them to be successful at work? I think we're missing an opportunity where I love and have kind of rethought and added another layer to it around care. Like, how does that person feel cared for at the right moment, at the right time? And I think we have to be really careful about how we ask questions of employees, because the question itself and how it's worded also informs the answer. It's almost like looking at data, bad data in, bad data out. It's also in questions that aren't getting to a level of intention. We're not going to get that level of answer out, and we're going to miss an opportunity. And so that for me is kind of at the core of what it means to have care within our human-centered design.
That's so good. And it just makes me want to dive in because I want to learn all the ways. I want my people to feel cared for, and I want them to feel cared for at the right time for the right needs. I believe that relationships trump everything. If we pour into relationships and we truly get to know the people that we're with, we can solve everything together, right? And that solving everything together could be that the person's season at the company is done and they need to move on. And we celebrate that, right? But we got to have those transparent opportunities. So I can't wait to dive in more. And I want you to touch on, because I think human-centered design is a term that a lot of people are familiar with, and you did say something about it, but how does it relate, differ? Like, what are the main differentiators? I know you said human care design, it's core, the core word is care, but just help us make sure we understand the difference.
100%. We'll start with human-centered design. I think that's kind of the holistic level there. And what's key to human-centered design, often people may also use the word people-centered, is really kind of going back to, do we understand the employees? Do we have employee personas? Do we understand who is making up our workforce? This requires, when we're looking at solving for problems before we launch an initiative, and really going back to that discovery phase, how are we understanding who our employees are? Then going to them to ask them to feed into our solutioning. How are we creating this space to design with them? And often we hear people now talking about co-creating, co-sharing. This is the aspect of that human-centered design approach. And this really needs to come from early on. So even in that discovery phase, as we're discovering the true problem, as we're building an hypothesis of what's going on, they're there at the very beginning. It's taking us out of these silos, out of like solutioning in closets, and inviting the employee in with us as we're seeking to understand the current state assessment. Then it's about how are we taking that data that we've collected and being able to also confirm data points that we may be getting out of a system and speaking to get context around what that is to then inform a really great understanding of what truly is a hypothesis that we're putting in place of if we do this, then we anticipate these things will happen in order to inform our test or our pilot. I always suggest as part of human-centered design, testing and piloting and prototyping is a part of that. Before we go spend money on a solution, we're going to be able to have a prototype or a smaller test group where the employees are involved in that and we're able to quickly really get an understanding of is that hypothesis correct or not? And are we seeing the level of change that we anticipated? That would inform us to take the feedback into a greater iteration in which we maybe invite more employees into that. That is a very high level of kind of the steps that we walk through around human-centered design. And that's ever evolving and changing. So we're constantly iterating and continuously creating those feedback channels in which the employees are a part of the data points that we're taking in. And so human care design, that is when we are going to our employees and asking them for feedback, when we're asking them for their input, when we're seeking that level of input, we're actually getting to a level of asking them about what is care. And in that persona, that when we're building that at the very beginning, we shouldn't just be wondering about what frustrates them or what delights them, but how do they define care? What is the current level of assessment around how they feel cared for or not in the organization? We then can take that level of data into our designing process. And how do we then successfully measure? How are we including that within our hypothesis of how are we solving for care here or not? And then how do we gain feedback as we start to prototype on that level of care? So it's that additional level of intention around having a hypothesis that includes care. Like, are we measuring care? Are we checking back in with the employee around care?
So I'm curious. I was taking notes as you are chatting here, and human centered design is the holistic understanding to help lead the people strategy and more at the micro level for focus. And then the human care design is the deeper strategy to connect person to person. So think more micro, if you will, with an emphasis that helps co create impact together on meaningful work.
Correct, Nikki, because that's what drives those outcomes that you were talking about, that you were saying relationships. To have those trusted relationships, we need to have meaningful connection. And I think human centered design starts to get us to a level of connection and how are we reconnecting at the human level. But care is needed for meaningful. We need to show people that we are truly taking the time to get to know them at a deeper level. And that drives that meaningfulness within how we're building connection and maintaining it.
Thank you for that. So we've got this understanding of what is human care design and then how it relates to human centered, both at play, both needed, right? But they overlap and really important to understand the difference and be pouring into both of these. And we're going to go deeper on the human care design today. So Gallup stats on employee engagement are so unfortunate year after year. It's like I feel like there's more emphasis than ever on culture and people first leadership and all these things. But man, the stats aren't getting better. Some leaders, like, they would even say like things that we're doing now, they're just overdone and maybe checking out on it because they don't see the stats moving. How do we, from Mindy Honcoop's seat, how do we not only make a dent on global employee engagement statistics and really like start to steer the ship in another direction?
That's such a good question, Nikki. And I think just to get even clear on what are those stats saying, those stats are saying that even though we've tried to make some change, employees still don't feel like their organizations are treating them as a human. They feel disconnected. They don't even have clarity of role. If you really dig into those Gallup results, when you really look at why, and how, like if we were to really dig into like what is the level of disconnection, how are we disconnected, when our employees don't even understand what is expected of them every day, that really drives a lack of that starts to you can start to be devalued. Like, where's the purpose in them coming to work every day? It's no wonder that we haven't seen a change in engagement levels when our own employees don't know how to engage in the organization in their role. And so this is where like human care design, if we truly are thinking about how are we connecting meaningfully with our employees, how are we being able to clarify something as simple as role clarity. It seems like it would be simple if we're taking the time, right? Are we really clear on the role? That's hard. Businesses is changing super quick. Our managers are overextended. And it's easy to assume that our managers understand what's expected of them. But often I find that our own managers are doing the best that they can with the limited knowledge that they have or the lack of clarity of that message. You may have two managers at the same level that they're hearing something from the executive team, but they're interpreting that due to the lack of clarity in different ways, and then going down and directing their teams to the best of their ability at that lower level of your individual contributor. You'll start to see teams where there's so much disconnect of where they think that focus lies. And care is truly even understanding, are we giving space for our managers to understand if there is a change? Are we giving them time to have a Q&A session around how that change even impacts them personally? Are we giving them time to take in and to be able to reflect and connect with themselves first on how they feel about it? And this is really about care, because if we're caring, then we're giving them the time to process it before they're expected to go and deliver the message around change to their direct employees, and to understand, how does that impact my team and what can I control in this, in order to understand how I direct the work of my employees to now successfully meet this change. And that change could be so many different things, right? That change could be we're moving in a different direction as an organization. We're pivoting our business strategy. There's just so many times where we're missing, even if it is a layoff, like we're not giving time for those managers to even who are going to support the employees that are remaining to understand, well, what are they remaining for?
Okay, so thank you so much for chiming in on just the Gallup stats, which I think really lead our industry like that data does. And just think that it's important to address the fact that like we're all working on it, but it's not changing. Like we have to do something different. And just those points that you made were so powerful. And we're going to get to really the human care design ecosystem in a minute and break down all these key components. Before we do that, I would love for you to touch on these mentoring conversations that you had shared with me before. You've interviewed a lot of leaders and you found some profound themes in your conversations that you had told me about. Can you tell our listeners about that?
So one of the things that I do is I get the opportunity to mentor first time chief people officers, first time heads of people. And what's interesting in those conversations is many that I found some common themes is as they're reaching out, they have maybe had a change of leadership. Maybe they used to report into a CEO, but now they've been moved under a CFO or a COO or even a chief legal officer. And that person, even if it is a CEO, they're finding that there is just a level of kind of pushback that they're getting from that individual, where there's not, that individual maybe hasn't worked with a chief people officer before, or they envision the success measures of a chief people officer or head of people as being very tactical. And there's this desire for them to be thinking differently, to be seen as having a voice, a true voice of strategy at that table. They've seen things where they've tried to advise, and their executive team has continued to kind of put them in the box of administration and have not heeded their guidance. And unfortunately, negative things happen as a consequence, which they had kind of provided foresight into. And it is this thing of like, you don't know what you don't know, and people are moving super quick, but they all come with this need and desire to want to show up differently, but they haven't had the experience. They know that there's a lack of knowledge and experience that they have, and they need someone that's been there, that has seen things differently, in order to mentor and advise them to be able to grow personally, but also how do they work with their executive team to start to shift their mindset to see them as strategic, and what does that look like for them? What is that next baby step? And often, because there's no one on that executive team with that level of experience or understanding, they're reaching out on their own with their own money and resources to seek guidance. One individual said, "I'm hiring my own chief people officer." And I just think that level of deficit of support of the individuals who are managing our people teams, that have this innate desire to make a difference, to, for example, implement human care design, human-centered design, but they haven't done it before and they want to take the next step. They've heard a webinar, they've heard about AI and generative AI, they've heard the needs of their employee, and they realize that they're stuck on this administrative island, and the needs of the business towards agility and meaningful connection of their employees is on the other side. And there's this gap, there's this bridge, and they want to start building that bridge, but they don't know how. And so that's where they're reaching out to, like myself and to others, to really help. How do we start to build that bridge, and what are those steps that we need to take?
And I was just thinking about a couple examples in my life right now with people that work in workplaces where the leaders are driving them nuts. And I empathize with these people so much that are very frustrated. But the common theme that I've seen across the board, not that they are bad people. There's some people out there that are like, we're in command and control and whatever, like that. They're not that. It is that they are ill-equipped. And all of the scenarios, the leadership above them, the executive leadership, has not invested in them to lead. And then the people below them are super frustrated and they're like, this, bad leader, blah, blah, blah. Because it manifests itself into like, they're working now for bad leaders, but these leaders, they don't want to be bad. They're good humans that really just need the equipment, the training, And yeah, I'm seeing it so loudly right now. So I want to comment on that. But I want to get to, because we're like pacing down the road here and we haven't even got to the human care design ecosystem. So can you break that down, the core components? I'm going to be taking some notes for our show notes so that those of you following along, if you want to like see all of this, I'll be putting that in the show notes. But tell us about human care design and the ecosystems, those components.
First of all, if we're looking at that ecosystem, first of all, if you aren't currently doing people-centered or human-centered design, that's definitely the first step. And we kind of walk through what are the elements of that. And that is really like the first place to start. How are we currently, do we even understand who our employees are? Do we have feedback channels? Those are some of the first elements. The other thing is around your communication planning and the alignment. What is that? Do we even have thoughtfulness around change management and the communication plans that support that? These are additional skill sets and focus that we need in a human care design ecosystem. And really the understanding of key stakeholder management. Do we have the mindset of how we co-share strategy at that executive team level, or are we siloed? Because if we want to be successful in human-centered and human care design, we really need to have a co-shared strategic approach. Everything needs to tie back to that business strategy. We also need to understand that business acumen. We need to understand, where is the company heading and where are we at today, and how do we start to build and realign our people initiatives, our own employees? How do we reconnect them back to those business initiatives? So I don't know if I'm articulating myself clearly, but these are some of like those key fundamental elements that we need to have in place that I also feel we're very much lacking, especially within our small, medium businesses, where you have to have a North Star. You have to have like strategy. You need to have a clear vision. You then need to have that broken down into their behaviors of what are those behaviors of success of how we want to bring employees in and work together. And then how do we start to, how are we looking at that in the organization? How do we weave that into the employee journey? Do we even understand what the employee journey is here? And then who are our employees? And then, how are we supporting, as they're moving through that journey, all those moments of change? How and what is that communication plan and cadence like through that? And then do we have the feedback channels? And do we have that level of care kind of woven into the elements of human-centered design to be able to gather that feedback, check in on a regular basis, and be able to evaluate how are we doing or are we not, and how we're approaching solutioning and iteration. And all of this starts to build that level of connection that we've been missing, that level of care that is so missing in our organizations today. And that is for all levels of leadership. Like, right, when we think about our employees, that includes our executives, that includes our board, right? I think that's often missing too. When we have human care, we're also caring about the people that we're serving. And that does include customers and our board. And it just kind of brings that holistic ecosystem all together.
One of the things that you just said at the end there is so profound and so important, that whatever it is, in this case, it's human care, is practice at all levels, up to the top and down. Do you know how many times I see people invest in things where it's like, we're going to implement this with middle level managers and then down. So just, whatever it is, it has to be practiced at all levels. And the thing that you said, Mindy, is like, even at the board level, I kind of forgot about that. So there's mine. Like, I haven't thought about that before. I usually think executive level needs to practice it, but all levels, that's something. Okay. And then my notes on when I'm looking at the human care design ecosystem. So we have feedback channels, we have a communication strategy, and we execute it with the correct mediums. We know our key stakeholders and they're equipped to do the things. We must have a North Star with a clear vision. We must have a strategy that ties to business outcomes. And then we have to tie the human care strategy to the employee journey. Did I miss anything?
No, that is very good. And I think that's really important. I do think that in that you'll then get the outcomes of, do we have consistency of process? As often we don't. Do we have a clear knowledge management? Is that centralized in one place? Is that easy to access? These are the outcomes. I think people often start to think about these as foundations. But I think if we're doing what you just said well, then those are things that will slowly start to evolve because it will inform how we centralize our knowledge management. You don't need to start there.
Yes. So good. Okay. Well, thank you for helping us to create our human care design checklist. Now, all of us have it. It is available to you. If you have any questions, you can call Mindy and she'll explain more. But we got this, like the why we're focused on this, like how to do it, mentality. Here's the checklist. Okay, cool. This has been so fun. And I've loved learning this. And there's a couple of things that I definitely need to get better at. So thank you for that.
You're welcome.
Okay. So we're going to head over to our lightning round where we always ask the first question the same. Everybody gets to add to our ever-growing recommended reading list. If you had to pick one book, favorite of all time, or a favorite recent read that ties to like a leadership audience, what book would you choose for them?
Atlas of the Heart by Brené Brown.
Oh gosh, it's so good. I'm such a fan of her. Yes. Yes. If you have not picked up Atlas of the Heart, go get it. It's so good. I heard you like wine. So do I. Tell us more. And like, what's your favorite? Like, what is this wine thing?
So I fell in love with the story of wine when I was living in Switzerland. I just love, it's like a Renaissance art. And I'm kind of a science nerd. And there's so much that goes into a bottle of wine. And I love hearing people's stories. And it's really that maker story, right? And so when I moved back to the US in Texas is actually, at the time I moved here 11 years ago, it was the 5th largest grape producing state in the US. And I started working at a winery because I just wanted to keep that part of my knowledge alive. I did that on the weekends. And I also started to develop my learning through starting the process of becoming certified as a sommelier. And so I am level 1 certified.
That is so cool. I love that. And then what is your favorite type of wine? Like if you had to pick one.
My favorite is a very specific to Fairsting Winery, which is in the Willamette Valley, Oregon, AVA region. I think specifically Yamhill, and their Pinot Noir is just phenomenal.
Okay. All right. That's awesome. Thanks for sharing. And I might hit you up so I can get the link to buy that and try it. Um, and then I have to ask, so Switzerland, like what took you there? How long did you live there?
Yeah, 3.5 years, and Expedia took me there. I was the HR project manager that led the team to set up the first entity for Expedia in Switzerland.
Oh my gosh, that's so cool. That is so cool. I bet that's just a coveted memory or experience that you have. That's neat. You mentioned the term nerd out. I love it. Like I always want to know what is it that like other people nerd out about. So what's your thing?
I love just like what makes people tick, right? I love like again, you get really nerded. I really get nerded around like the neurology, the bioscience. If we start talking about the different levels of like just chemicals in our body and how that like impacts our ability to think and process information. Oh, I could start reading articles and just kind of go down the interwebs forever reading about that stuff.
Mindy, finally, what is the best way for listeners to connect with you after the show today?
They can email me at Mindy Honcoop at agileandhr.com or on LinkedIn. And also do have a website, agileandhr.com.
Mindy Honcoop, I loved learning from you today about something you're so passionate about, and it shines. Human care design. Love the conversation. My truth you can act on from today. Number one, human care design is focused on care. Care is at the core. So, how are we delighting and supporting employees? How does an employee feel cared for at the right time for the right need? Number two, human centered design is the holistic understanding to help lead the people strategy and more of the macro level focus. The human care design is the deeper strategy to connect person to person. Think micro strategy emphasis is helping co create impact together on meaningful work. Love that. Care at the core and, macro level focus is strategy, micro co-create together, all towards meaningful work. Love it. Number three, the reason engagement stats are low is because people don't feel connected to the people and the mission in the business, and helping them to feel clarity of how their role fits into the bigger picture. Really good to reflect on. And number four, let's just cut to the chase. Prioritizing relationship building is key, and stop assuming where people are. The relationship, when we have those opportunities to connect and truly have conversation that, allows us to understand each other where we're transparent, we don't assume anymore because we've got the relationship and we're telling each other truthful information because we trust each other. So powerful. Thank you so much, Mindy, for sharing your heart and lots of work that you've done over the years into this very fast, full episode. We'll see y'all next time. We just left the world a little bit better. Now, go do something with it.